Ladies and gentlemen, I am Paul Brigade, Vice President and Senior Advisor to the President and University Dean, and I am so pleased to welcome all of you to the special remembrance of Zhe Zack Zeng. I would ask you, Zach and the Brighton Pier Volunteer Ambulance 3059, I would ask all of you if you wouldn't mind rising for the university's NROTC Honor Guard to post the colors, which will be followed by the national anthem, and then we will all recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Color Guard, post the colors. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I remember, almost as though it were yesterday, when we got the news of the cataclysmic disaster of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attack on the Twin Towers in New York City. Of the almost 3,000 lives lost, 6 were University of Rochester alumni. Among them was Zhe Zeng, known to all of us as Zach. On that fateful day, Zach arrived for work at the Bank of New York. When his building was evacuated after the plane struck the towers, Zach gathered all the first aid kits he could find and headed to Ground Zero. He was last seen on a New York City TV broadcast. He was providing emergency aid to victims of the attack. He was never seen again. I was the Dean of Students during Zach's years at the university, during which he was first an undergraduate engineering student and later an MBA student in the Simon School. I became acquainted with Zach because of his support of efforts by the Student Medical Emergency Response Team, or MERT, to acquire an ambulance for use here on the River campus. And I was aware that he rode with the Brighton ambulance as an emergency medical technician. Students who are EMTs or first responders are special. I had and continue to have great respect for them because they place themselves in life and death situations, saving lives, protecting others, often at great personal risk to themselves. They are heroes, in my opinion. Zach Zeng was one of those heroes. I knew him to be a fine young man who had deep devotion to helping others. His involvement as an emergency responder, both on campus and by riding with Brighton Ambulance, is evidence of that fact. And now here we are today, 15 years after that horrible day in 2001, to pay tribute to Zach. The University of Rochester and those of its representatives who are here today, including Dean of the College, Richard Feldman, Dean of the Associate Dean of the Simon School, Ron Hansen, and others who will speak in a few moments, extends its thanks to the Brighton Volunteer Ambulance Board of Directors for their generosity and kind thoughtfulness by dedicating Brighton's new ambulance to Zach and all the rescuers who died on September 11th, 2001. The university is grateful to our BVA neighbors for helping to establish this legacy in honor of one of our own. May it live in perpetuity as a reminder of Zach's sacrifice so that others might live. And now to offer a few words on this memorable occasion, it is my pleasure to introduce, in order, Robert Clark, Dean of the Hagem School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, Andrew Ainsley, Dean of the Simon Business School, and finally, Daniel McHugh, President of Brighton Volunteer Ambulance.
So when engineers see problems, they try to fix them, especially when they seem insurmountable. I'd like to think that's part of the reason why Zach, a 1995 electrical engineering graduate of the University of Rochester School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, didn't hesitate when the first plane struck the World Trade Center on 9/11. Zach, who served as an emergency technician with Brighton Volunteer Ambulance during his students' days here, gathered all the first aid kits he could find, left his office at the Bank of New York, and he headed to the scene. He was last seen on television footage providing first aid to a woman on a stretcher before the South Tower collapsed. Zach was described by friends and co-workers as humble, intelligent, committed, kind, giving, and selfless. He could have turned the other way on 9/11, but he didn't. He saw a problem and he tried to help to fix it. Take on the world. That's what we tell our students at the Hagem School of Engineering. Hopefully none of them will ever be confronted with the choice Zach had to make on 9/11. Nonetheless, he's an inspiration to all of us. Taking on the world and making it ever better means seeing problems and trying to fix them, even when they seem insurmountable.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Rob. It's an honor to be here this afternoon as we remember Zach Zeng. While I didn't know him personally, I've been deeply moved in hearing everything about him over the last few weeks as we prepared for this event. Zach was an impressive individual, and I wish that I had had the opportunity to meet him. Zach graduated from Simon in 1998 with an MBA in finance and in corporate accounting. As a student, giving back to the community was extremely important to Zach, as you've heard from everybody else today. And this is something that his parents instilled in him from a very young age. During his time at Rochester, he spent many hours with as an EMT at Brighton Volunteer Ambulance, and his desire to give back to the community just seemed to grow stronger, particularly after his father's sudden death whilst Zach was a student here. Helping others was something he felt compelled to do. After graduation, and you've heard the story already, he went to work in New York, in Lower Manhattan, and as you've heard, he did this extraordinary thing. He ran towards the scene of danger as others were moving out of that area. It's an incredible story. The definition of a hero is a person who, in the face of danger, combats adversity through impressive feats of ingenuity, bravery, or strength, often sacrificing his or her own personal concerns for some greater good. I suspect Zach didn't consider himself a hero at all. While many were running away from these towers, Zach ran towards them, not for a moment thinking of his own safety, but for the well-being of those he was seeking to help. While what he did was incredibly brave, I'm sure it was instinctive. It was simply second nature, something he did many times as a volunteer EMT here in Rochester. He wouldn't have considered doing otherwise. I couldn't be prouder to recognize Zach as a Simon Business School graduate and alum, along with Jeffrey Smith, the 1988 Simon graduate, and the other Rochester alums that we lost that day. Their memory inspires and calls us to pursue the greater good. May each of us respond to that call. Thank you.
I want to thank the university for inviting us to this event. I represent Brighton Volunteer Ambulance, a nonprofit community service organization with a proud history. We're a busy agency. We respond to more than 100 calls a week for people who are critically ill or injured. And Zach was one of our members. We welcome and encourage university students to become EMTs like Zach. Brighton Volunteer Ambulance sponsored Zach for the New York State Emergency Medical Technician course, where he attended classes, studied textbooks, and learned practical skills. He passed his New York State written and practical examinations and trained with experienced EMTs to learn the craft. He became a regular member of our crew, responding to medical emergencies of every kind. Zach volunteered as an EMT all through his undergraduate and graduate career at the university. I'm told he often carried a bag with the basic EMT tools of the trade, a stethoscope, a blood pressure cuff, bandages, and such, even after he returned to New York City to support his family. Working alongside Zach in the ambulance, we saw in him the critical qualities of an EMT: integrity, compassion, and courage. Zach's willingness to give his time and talent to serve others speaks to his character and represents the character and spirit of all our personnel. On September 11th, 2001, Zach brought that courage, that compassion, and those skills to bear at a time of dire need. Brighton Town Supervisor Sandy Frankel said in her 2002 State of the Town address, "On a day which changed us forever, Zach died doing what he loved, helping others." Brighton Volunteer Ambulance nominated Zach for the New York State Emergency Medical Services Memorial. Michael Pollack wrote an appeal to the New York State Governor, George Pataki, citing the selflessness and courage of police officers, firefighters, and EMS personnel like Zach, who responded without waiting to be called to that terrible scene. New York Health Commissioner Dr. Antonio Novello wrote a letter to the State Emergency Medical Services Council supporting Zach's nomination and stating, and I quote, "Mr. Zeng gave his life during the tragic events of September 11th, 2001, while he was providing medical care to the injured. His provision of care to the injured is well documented. Mr. Zeng knew the dangers. He had stayed to help in those first critical minutes. He did so as a trained emergency responder who did what his training taught him to do. Without hesitation and in support of the formal EMS response, he acted in the best interest of his patients and in the fine tradition of our EMS system. Mr. Zeng deserves this recognition, and our EMS systems should see his name on the memorial not as an exception, but as an example of EMS dedication and bravery." End quote. The State Emergency Medical Services Council accepted Zach's nomination, and when the memorial was opened in May of 2004, Zach's name was included on the first Star of Life leaves that were placed on the Tree of Life. Former Governor Pataki spoke of Zach in his 2002 State of the State address, saying, "Zach Zeng, a 29-year-old employee at the Bank of New York, emigrated to America from mainland China as a teenager. He worked his way through the University of Rochester, built a promising career in business, and became an EMT to help his neighbors. He was living the American dream." Zach wasn't at the World Trade Center on the morning of September 11th, but he knew that his emergency training could save lives. So he ran toward the danger and confusion. he was last seen on television caring for others. He died an American hero. Zach is an American hero, and it's fitting that we honor Zach by dedicating this ambulance in his name. In his selflessness and compassion, Zach demonstrated the best attributes of the people who serve in emergency services. Seeing his name etched on the wall of the ambulance inspires us and reminds us to give our best every day. Thank you.
As we bring the ceremony to a close, I again want to extend, on behalf of the University of Rochester, our great thanks for the kind and generous thoughtfulness of the Brighton Volunteer Ambulance to honor one of our own. It is what we seek for all of our graduates, that is, to serve. And Zach, though his young life ended prematurely and sadly, served his community and the world as we would expect a University of Rochester alumnus to do. And now I would ask the color guard to retire the colors.